That thing has terrible mileage. All right, here we are in episode 2. We have another person from my cruise ship career. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is supposed to be a podcast about creativity, not about parading a bunch of cruise ship friends. We'll get to some non-cruise ship people in the next episode, I promise. But this is a good one today. It is my good friend and fantastic saxophonist and woodwind doubler, Bryan Canonigo. Bryan is a fellow Canadian who I worked with for years. I consider him a very good friend. Today we talk about his approach to woodwind doubling, getting better versus plateauing as a musician, finding motivation, why we teach music, the sacrifices we make to be full-time musicians, and at the end, something about butter. So stay tuned for the butter. Okay, here we go!
Yeah. Hey.
You got your voice memo going?
Yep.
All right. So I'm talking to Bryan Canonigo today, my good friend.
What's up?
Of many, many years. How many years? 20, 30 years? 40 years? 100 years?
No, I think we actually met 2010 maybe, or 2011?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think it was, well, I started... Yeah, because it would have been on the Liberty.
Yeah.
And that was my first contract, and then I came back to it later, and you were still there. I think that was like my third contract or something. Yeah.
I was still there. Oh my God.
I mean, like, you would probably had a vacation in between there, but...
it just makes it sound like I lived there for 2 years or whatever.
Yeah, basically. Well, you know, it kind of did.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I remember, meeting you. And that was funny because, like, my friend Lloyd, who had done a cruise ship... Do you remember that? Had done a cruise ship... here, I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see you. There you go. Over, like, Christmas or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was in school, and he had gone and done, like, I don't know, like a month or a couple weeks or something.
Oh, I remember him now, yeah.
And he was describing you, and I remember getting to the ship, and I'm like, do you meet this guy Lloyd from Nova Scotia, from Newfoundland? And very small world, very interesting.
I think that's I don't know, it's the thing about being in this business, right? It doesn't matter whether you're on cruise ships, you're on Vegas, you're in LA, you're in New York, whatever coast you're on, it's a really, really small community. I mean, if you think about it. You know.
Yeah, man. So, well, just so I just want to give everybody context. Can you talk about your background a little bit? Like how? So I'll just let you go.
So originally from Toronto, Canada. Grew up there. Went to undergrad at Humber College in Toronto, and I did the jazz program there. But it was really my undergrad was really in jazz studies altogether. Did the 4 years there, and then at that time I was also performing quite a bit. I was with this group called the Toronto All-Star Big Band, which I was performing in as a sideman, and I was also like a featured soloist doing bunch of clarinet solos, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, did that for like 4 or 5 years. And then I also led the band for like a really, really short time. I think it was when we were looking for a new band later. Anyway, finished undergrad, graduated, and then, I started doing cruise ships almost right away, like full time. I had done cruise ships during the summers in between some of my years in undergrad, so it was really interesting actually, because the reason I got hired in the first place was because of my skills as a woodwind doubler. They needed somebody on this specific ship to play flute and clarinet on these hard shows, and the recruiter was like, "Oh, you're like the only one in the school who doubles." And I was like, "Oh, there's a few other people, but that was always been my big thing was being able to play flute and clarinet like really, really well." So
yeah, man, you make yourself a commodity that way.
Well, it's just I loved it too. It was really more just like I didn't think of it as like I'm doing this to get work. It was always about like, man, I love the sound of the clarinet and I love the sound of the flute. And
yeah, and just to preface for our listeners, anyone listening to this, Bryan is a like unbelievably fantastic alto saxophone player who's also equally as good on flute and clarinet, which is not as common. Like there's lots of I wouldn't say lot. I would say there are lots of saxophone players. There's less doublers, and there's even less people who can play all of them actually really well. So you're among those people. So.
Well, I've always treated it as like I am not a woodwind doubler. I am a clarinet player the moment I touch that instrument. I am a flute player the moment I touch that instrument. So it's really more about like having. I always say this to my students too. It's like you got to have respect for the instrument that you're playing, right? It's not just like something you just pick up and blow into. It's like no, there's a certain way you need to play that instrument. No matter what you're doubling on. Right, so so that's always been kind of like my big thing about that, and I took lessons specifically on flute, and I took lessons specifically on clarinet. It's not like I just would pick it up on the side after practicing saxophone or whatever. But anyway, being in the Toronto All Star Big Band really that was my like. That was the place where I really developed my doubling, just because of how important it was to the music and
because of the repertoire, right?
Yeah, and we were playing a lot of the old like Frank Sinatra charts, the Nelson Riddle arrangements with like a lot of doubling in it, and then obviously all the clarinet solos that I was playing. But yeah, it was interesting that was always just a thing for me. I was never, it was never like secondary. It was always kind of like primary. Yeah. So
yeah, like play it like you mean it kind of thing.
Yeah.
I took that to heart, and that's something that like I was so lucky to have you on like in my early cruise ship career because it was just like I got to have somebody that I could. I'm not really competitive, but like it really does help to have somebody there that's like way better than you, so you can not to the point where you what did one of our friends used to say before a particular show? He goes, it was a very hard show. He goes, "Are you ready to have your self-esteem ground into a fine powder?" But no, it's like that's one end of the spectrum, but like the other one is just like. I was surrounded by really good musicians. All of them were better than me, and that made me improve so much quicker, I think, because like I needed to practice to keep up with you guys. So,
well, that
and
was
you would give me flute lessons after the shows and stuff.
Right. That was the thing too. Like I started cruise ships like probably like 4 or 5 years before you did.
Yeah.
And when I got on there, it was the kind of the same thing. I was the new guy, and all the other guys that were playing around me were really, really good, at everything. And I was hired to play lead alto as like a 19-year-old, and the musical director was the tenor player. And then the Barry player...
That's intimidating,
The Barry player had been there for like, a few years too. So they were like older than me. And here I am trying to lead the section, and it's like, yeah. So I quickly learned.
Come on, guys, let's do it.
Yeah. No, it wasn't like that at all. I was very, I was very shy, if you can imagine that. I was kind of still in my shell, if you will.
Okay. You weren't so shy when I met you.
Yeah.
You're settled into being yourself, I guess.
Yeah, and it took me a while to gain that confidence. It's really what it boils down to, is that, like, how confident are you in your skills as a musician, as a leader, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that didn't really come along until like 4 or 5 years into it. So when we met, I was already in that mode of, like, you know, being a leader, or like at least a seasoned, you know, more seasoned musician, I guess. But yeah, so after I did, you know, cruise ships, you know, I mean, I think we had done a contract together, like the last few years we were in it together, right?
Yeah, well, I did like a month. I was on the Liberty. And then I came back to it for like a whole contract. And then we did the Splendor.
Yeah, we did that huge longer contract on the Splendor together.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the longer one, yeah.
Yeah, so at that time my mindset was already like, cuz that was probably like year 8 of cruise ships, you know. So I was already like making my plans on the way out.
Yeah.
So what that meant was, for me, at least, it was, you know, preparing to go back to grad school. And, you know, I thought about it a lot, and I think education and teaching and, you know, going back to that part of music was always a thing in the back of my mind. Like, I put it off for so many years just because I was, you know, just working and having fun on the cruise ships.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I don't know, something happened where I was like, you know what, I think I want to go back to teaching and academia in that side of, you know, that side of things. And I've always been like a big, you know, I've always been a big fan of just like things like jazz history, jazz theory, you know. But not even just jazz, though, like just music theory, music history in general, and just, you know, digging into music at that level. You know what I mean? Like,
at a
deeper level.
Did you have like a plan in mind for after grad school, or was it just kind of like, I know that I want to do that, and that's going to be my next step? But did you know kind of where you wanted to go after that, or
so? Even when I was in undergrad, I kind of knew that was the environment I wanted to be in at some point in my life, you know, teaching younger adults how to be, you know, better people, basically. And that's no joke, you know, it's like whether it was going to be in music or something else. Like I always liked that environment of, you know, growth. And just that environment of, like, you know, encouraging everybody around you to be better people.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, and it's we you know, you remember the good and bad things about places, obviously, but I know that, like, just you got me thinking about, like, the environment of a cruise ship versus the environment of grad school, and it's like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. I think everybody sort of has their own sort of like misery with whatever situation, right? Like the whole misery,
misery loves company
misery contest. Not misery loves company, but like misery is like relative, I guess.
Oh yeah.
You can, like, you know, it's happiness kind of fades after the change of whatever like improvement you made. Whatever. It's just people will find a way to be unhappy sometimes.
Well, okay,
but in saying that, I was gonna say, like, grad school, that's you on a cruise ship was kind of like that, made me that you, because you left before did you leave before I did, or after?
I
You
think
went
so.
and got your
Yeah, I left
master's
like a
before I
year
did.
before you did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. And I was only in year 6 by the time I left, so you went much longer than I did. But I was just gonna say, like, it is kind of like there's not as much. The cruise ship can very much be a place where you can grow personally and improve your craft and like just get better and doing the stuff. But it's not set up for that. Obviously, it's a job, right? And you live in an office building that floats. So it's like, or a hotel, whatever. And it's like, aside from like you and maybe a couple other people, there's not that many people actively trying to improve every day, you know? And that's something that I kind of realized, like watching, like you went and like, I'm toward the end of my whole thing, like Meredith was gone, my wife, she was off the ship, and I just like, I had no reason to be there anymore. And I kind of shut down and went into prepare for grad school mode. And I, whatever, it all worked out. I got accepted and all this stuff, but like, it was really, really hard. It was going against the grain of everybody around me who was just there to work and let's go to the beach. Let's blah, 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 yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting comparison, I guess.
So for me, that environment, it's a work environment, right? So
yeah.
I don't think I ever had any delusions about it not being a work environment. We're there to work.
Yeah, you're there to do your job.
Yeah.
You're there to play, and then you're done. But
Yeah,
then it's like after that, Oh, I think I lost you.
No, I'm
you
still
are.
here. Yeah. So,
Okay.
So yeah, we're there to work. We're there to like play our music, and then get paid. Like,
Yep.
I mean, if you break it down that way, it's pretty simple. But it's all of those moments, before and after the show. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you just here to just, do this and repeat the cycle and over and over again, or do you want to do something else? And that I think that's that's the crossroads that we all come to as musicians, especially on the cruise ship. It's like, if I'm not improving, then what am I doing, right? I always talk about this too with my students now. It's like, I'm more worried about their trajectory than their results.
Yeah.
Right? And it's that concept of like, yeah, you may play well today, but were you better than you were yesterday? Right?
Yeah.
And we all plateau at some point, and I'm pretty sure I plateaued on the cruise ships for many years where I didn't get any better, and I just like kind of stayed the same and just, towed the line. But the whole point is that, being a professional, I don't think I got worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, is like you were playing every day.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said for that, which I sort of like, I kind of scoffed at that a little bit when I would hear that on the ship. It's like, well, at least you're playing. It was funny because you were saying you talked to Joel about like, you were talking to him about the cruise ship or no, I'm sorry, that wasn't you. You know Joel too, but it was Brew. George. He was another. This is all saxophone player friends of ours. He was in New York. I want to say he went to Smalls and saw Joel Fromm play, and he was talking to him outside, and he was just saying like, he's like, oh yeah, I'm a saxophone player too, and he's like, oh, cool, like whatever. And he's like, I work on a ship, and Joel was like, that's really great, man. Like you got a steady gig playing saxophone. That's amazing. And this is like one of the best saxophone players on the planet. Like really like emphasizing like, don't take that for granted, because like those gigs are rare, man, and they're getting, I don't know, I don't want to say they're getting rarer, but I don't think that it's not really an explosion in that job market coming anytime soon. I don't know though, but the point is, yeah, you don't get you maintain a certain level from just playing every day and all that stuff. But
yeah, and
definitely you don't have somebody like telling you to get better. There's no act like, and especially you, because you were usually the best musician in the band. So it's like it's hard to get, like I was saying at the beginning, it's so much easier to get better when you're surrounded by amazing people that are better than you, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No. So I took a lesson with Joel Fromm probably, it was like the first time in 2010. So that was like halfway through my cruise ship thing, you know. I started in 2005, and then I ended up leaving in 2015. But yeah, I remember taking my first lesson with Joel in 2010, and it ended up being like a 4-hour lesson / hangout / whatever.
Yeah.
And he was one of the few people that at that time that was just like, yeah, man, don't ever take that job for granted, because, you know, it's you're making money and you're making a living playing your saxophone, like, and making music.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people can have. And then, but he's like, yeah, but you need to continue, you know, improving. And
you need a trajectory.
Yeah,
man. It's like you need to feel like you're moving forward. Otherwise, it's like being hopeless.
Yeah, and it was this, like, you know, there was this guy that I respected the hell out of, you know, saying that, like, yeah, this cruise ship gig is good for you, you know. And at that point, I hadn't heard that from a lot of other people on the on the ships.
Well, and it's like, but then maybe you've heard it, but not from somebody that you actually took seriously. You know, it's like, you know, it's like maybe your relatives or something are telling you. This is an example, but like, oh, that sounds great. Like, oh, you get to play saxophone and live and travel around, and you get paid a certain amount, and it's like, that sounds great. And yeah, like, of course it does. But again, it like, if you stop moving, you stop progressing, and you're kind of like, I'm just sort of surviving. I'm treading water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how.
It's perspective, right? You gotta have that
exactly
that perspective of like, all right, I am doing this cruise ship gig, but you know, it's better than flipping burgers at McDonald's.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Of course. And it's like, there's gratitude. You got to have gratitude. But it's... I got to the point, and I was definitely... Even as dark as I got on those... As dark as we both were. it just, you know, it's... You don't have windows, right?
Yeah.
That was something along the lines of... you were saying, like... what was it? We were doing like boat drill or something, and somebody was like boat drill where they like pack. You have to, like, they have to see that we all know how to like pack into a lifeboat, and so it's like 150 people in a tiny little lifeboat, and somebody
it's like 100
was
degrees in there too.
Yeah, and it's 100 degrees. Like, there's people like literally stacked vertically on top of each other, like how the benches are. It's like, oh, it's awful, like claustrophobia to the max. But
man, I'm getting PTSD just hearing about this again. Oh my god.
I feel like some host or something was like said like, well, at least it's nice outside, and you were like, yeah, that's what prisoners say. Or it's like a nice day outside. It's like, and you compared it to like looking through like the bars of your cell or something. It was dark. But you know,
we had
to go through there's bad parts of any job and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, I was still able to remind myself anyway, I think everybody was, that we're playing music for a living. But that doesn't mean you're just going to stop wanting to get better, get somewhere else in your life, maybe make a change, you know, all this stuff that everybody wants to do. But yeah, it's I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, it's a big deal, you know, finding what keeps you motivated while you're doing this job. And the one thing always that it came back to was just getting better as a musician, getting better as a saxophone player, getting better as a flute and clarinet player. Like, I remember there were contracts towards the latter half of my time on the cruise ships where I would spend just 6 months practicing flute. You know, I didn't even touch my saxophone, in like one or two contracts, you know, or the same thing where like
besides playing the show.
Yeah, besides playing the show, but like I only practiced clarinet for like a contract, you know. So it was that kind of level of like, man, I really need to like face the dragon, you know, just confront the dragon of like of clarinet for like 6 months.
Well, it's interesting because it's like a semester of school. Like a contract would be like between like 5 and like 7 months or something. And
yeah, exactly.
Compare it kind of to a year or a semester of school, just focusing on one thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
But no, I'm like just to finish off that part of the, you know, my career. Yeah, I'm very grateful for the time that I had on there, not just financially, but you know, just the sense of like isolation and just being able to like focus on yourself and being able to figure out what you want to do in life, but not just that, but as a musician, you know, you start figuring out your priorities, right? Mm-hmm. And even as a professional, you start figuring out what do I really want to do, you know?
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. And then, so it was what, like 8-9 years by the time you left? You had done.
It was 10 years, man.
10 years,
Yeah.
I only did 6, so I mean, like I got a dark, but it's like you went through a lot longer without windows, basically.
Yeah, and you know, you remember this probably, but there was an issue with my last contract and how the company cheated me out of some money and all of that business. I'm not gonna get into that now, but definitely
no, for sure. Basically,
was
the
a big
rule
motivator
of this
for me to
podcast,
leave, you know.
No, for sure. The rule of this podcast is like, hey, let's not do anything to get us fired or burn any bridges. But I think it's okay to be worth mentioning. Here's my point with all that, and I'm not going to get dark or anything with it. Mm-hmm. It's just the company happens to offer you an incentive for staying 10 years, and when you get offered that is obviously going to make you want to stay. If you're at year 8, you're like, hey, what's another 2 years? I'll get the package. I'll get out of there.
Honestly, that's the only
and when
reason
that doesn't
why
happen.
that's why I stayed for the entire 10 years was the promise of this.
Yeah. And the argument can be made like not every company does that. And it's like it's an extra bonus thing. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be mad if you didn't get this extra bonus thing. But no, they told you it was coming for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then when it doesn't happen, whether or not there's technicalities on either side or whatever, and you're not the only person that's been, I don't know if I want to use the word cheated, but like you were led on to believe this, and they did everything they possibly could to make sure you didn't get that little package that they were dangling from a distance. So I just wanted to say that, just being honest.
You know, I'm going to say it. I did feel cheated, though. I mean, I am.
No, and you would. Of course
I'm totally going to use that word, and
sure.
You know, there was a lot of dishonesty between me and the company. Like they were being dishonest to me about, you know, dates and times and contract lengths, and they tried to, you know, get me on some technicalities here and there. But at the end of the day, I learned a huge lesson, you know, about working for a corporation, right? And how this is a business. Like, this is, you know, things are going to happen like this throughout your career working for a corporation. So, lesson learned. And, that's why I think I felt a lot better when I moved on and went back to grad school.
Well, and I, just from talking to you, I'm thinking of conversations we had before while we were on ships and then now after. It's like, you know, and especially for me, I was just telling Meredith the other day, I was going to say you can't pay me enough to go back there. You definitely could, but I'm not anywhere near as, like, when things get bad right now, like, I'm not the happiest guy right now, I'll be honest. I'm trying real hard to switch careers and do all this stuff. I'm also not. I was like real miserable at a certain point, and it was usually when I didn't have Meredith, because that's just like the contracts. Like you live in these tiny little cabins, and like which is already kind of like stressful when you're with somebody, with your spouse, your significant other. But when you're just with like a random person and your wife is like miles away and you can't see her for 4 or 5, 6 months at a time, it's rough, man. And but yeah. Anyway, I think we're both in a better place now. Now, in saying that, what did you do after? Fill us in of where you went after cruise ship. When did you leave? What year?
I left 2015, and then I ended up going to Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, for my master's in classical saxophone. So yeah, that happened.
Yeah. So you were going for that technique, man. You're going for that technique angle. Well,
the reason why I decided to go there was because of my teacher, Joe Girard. He studied with Donald Cinta, who's like, one of the biggest names in all of classical saxophone. So I was like, you know what? I want to learn that school of playing. But not just that. I had, like, to be honest, I had zero experience playing that kind of music. Right? And I told myself, like, if I wanted to teach at the university level, like, I should know about this. And I should know about, how to play classical music anyway, in general. So the school offered me, a pretty good package in terms of an assistantship and all that stuff. But at the same time, they offered me teaching opportunities. And that's really one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to go to a smaller kind of conservatory school like that, rather than a bigger university where there were less of those opportunities,
Yeah.
So, when I was at Columbus State, I did the master's program there, and it's a 2-year program. And, I felt like I was starting from ground zero, to be honest. Yeah, I had to reset everything, my embouchure, the way I use my air, the way I phrase, the way I, like, just everything. And the first thing I told Joe Girard, I was like, hey, I want you to just kick my ass, basically.
Yeah.
About everything. And he didn't let off the gas pedal, man. He was just
good.
The 2 years, my first 2 years there. He just kept going and really just kept pushing me, to really learn how to play this music. But it's not just that, man. I learned a lot of disciplinary kind of things that I guess I had forgotten about, or maybe that just weren't well developed when I was on the cruise ships. And I'm talking about,
for example,
I'm talking about using your time really well, like time management, right? I thought I had that down, but not the case at all. Just being more effective when you're practicing or improving,
Yeah.
And then the big thing for me was like documenting things. Documenting your progress, documenting your practice routine, like writing things down or reminding yourselves in certain parts of the music, that kind of stuff. I guess all of that came to light again when I went back to school, and how deficient I really was in those areas,
So if for someone who maybe doesn't, maybe there's a musician listening, or who has more of a, I'm just going to practice what I'm not good at, and what did documenting things specifically, what is that, what was the result of that, what was the advantage of doing that kind of thing?
So when you write things
versus
down,
maybe not, I guess.
Yeah, when you write things down, it helps you just focus on certain aspects of your playing, because when you walk into a practice room and you only have an hour, right?
Yeah.
You want that to be as focused as possible. And at least with me, I know that sometimes I just get too distracted with so many different things, whether it's on the saxophone or in the music or whatever. And if I don't write things down that I need to work on, then I get completely sidetracked on something else. So I had to like prioritize basically what I needed to work on to improve, to basically. And then that turned into, especially when learning pieces, this is what I learned, just the way classical musicians do this, is that they really hyper focus on one or two pieces a semester, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And as a jazz musician, we don't do that, right? As jazz musicians, we don't really, take that kind of detail, I think. And I'm not speaking for every jazz musician, but I know a lot of, just throughout my career as a jazz musician and / commercial musician, I don't work on a tune for like a whole semester.
Yeah.
So it was really eye-opening, just digging that deep into something.
Yeah.
And man, I really thought I had my stuff together, and then apparently not. So
go to back to grad school to get spanked again.
Well, and you just start noticing all these things that you take for granted, like, I don't know, intonation.
Yeah.
Or like being able to keep a steady tone throughout a thing, or like phrasing. Like, for example, phrasing was a big thing for me. I thought I knew how to phrase, but I really didn't. And what I mean by that is, taking a line in a piece of music and just being able to bring out certain things, or being able to, play it in a way that was more convincing, and it wasn't just notes on a page, right? And
gotcha.
when you become a commercial musician, all that kind of stuff just falls by the wayside sometimes, when you just gotta basically play the notes on the page. But I realized that there was like way more in the music that I was kind of just ignoring or basically taking for granted.
Yeah. That's good. So you did Columbus.
Yeah.
You got your master's.
So after my master's degree, I decided to stay for another 2 years. I did an artist diploma, which is another 2 years, but basically it was like you didn't have to do any academic courses, and everything was just performance courses. So I was basically taking lessons for 2 more years in classical saxophone. And I don't regret a single day of that, because I needed more time. I needed more time to improve. I needed more time to just be in academia again in that setting. And I needed more time for teaching experience. So some of my teaching experiences was, leading my own jazz combo. For example, I got to do that for 3 years there. I got to teach history classes, theory classes. Like, just more time to do that was invaluable.
And plus you're learning, you're getting better at all those things by teaching it, right?
Yeah.
Best way to learn. So
and this is the way I like to do things anyway. It's like I get super obsessed about a certain thing, and I like nerd out on it. So that's literally what happened. It was just like I was just nerding out on like classical music for 3 years.
For non-musical context of how Bryan obsesses over things, while he was on the ship, he bought a Street Fighter joystick How would you describe that? It was the size of like a.
So it's an arcade stick. It's like
Yeah, so it's an arcade stick.
Yeah.
But you kept getting like new ones that kept getting more intricate. So Brian would play Street Fighter on, I think it was on Xbox, right?
Yeah.
But then he had this special controller that was like an arcade controller. So, but he did that for like 2 straight contracts or something. I swear to God, man, nobody ever beat him. You were very good at that game, but yeah, so you wake up.
It's just what happens.
At like 5 a.m.
Like
go practice for like 4 hours and then play Street Fighter.
I don't know what it is about my life or my personality, but I always have to be good at whatever I'm doing.
Oh yeah,
right.
No, I get it.
I'm not saying this to like be a braggart or anything. Like I just set really high standards for myself. So whether it's like gaming or music or relationships, I always have to be like at a certain level, right? I don't know why, but there's something in my brain that goes, oh, mediocrity, you can't do that. Like it's you've gotta be better than that. It's always just like, yeah, you gotta be better. So like in this context of Street Fighter, like I was so into it that I looked into training with other people.
Yeah, and I mean, like we're our group of friends are not like what I would necessarily call the like cool archetype. I mean, we're a lot of gamers, a lot of indoor kids, right? But yeah, so like we're coming from an atmosphere of like playing Warcraft on our on a LAN, having LAN parties with God. And see, that's part of the ship that I do miss. Sorry, is like the sort of like the camaraderie you get like really really fast with people.
It's
because
the community
you're just always around
thing.
people.
Yeah, it's the community.
Yeah,
right?
it's a very very strong community. I will say that. But. Yeah, so you looked into like training against other people on the ship,
because
like in different departments.
Well, no. So I was just treating it like I did playing my instruments,
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, I need to get lessons. Like I need to get lessons in Street Fighter from these like professionals. So I looked into like pro gamers in Toronto for a little bit. And like getting lessons with them and like training.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I did not know this.
No. So this is like so intense. Like I wanted to take the whatever 4-5 weeks I had a vacation in between cruise ship contracts, and I wanted to like take lessons to be really good.
I love that.
And it didn't end up happening, but there's just something in my personality where I feel like I have to be at a certain level all the time. I don't know why, but it's just interesting the parallels between my hobbies and my professional life, right?
Well, that's perfect that you say that, because like I was just gonna say the whole thing about you're saying delving into one piece of music for an entire semester. You're gonna get more out of like really delving into something than like from one thing than you will from sort of delving into like 5 different things, And I think that mindset is probably why you were going to look for Street Fighter lessons, because like you're just like, this game will be so much more fun if I'm at this level, Which is what that's anything. That's music, that's any craft is going to be I think more satisfying if you're just out of just the higher the level you are,
Yeah, I guess it's the whole thing of like dedication, right? It's like how dedicated are you to being the best at something, or I mean, it's not necessarily always a competition. I don't think I grew up with that mentality. You know what I mean? That I always like I have to be good, or else my parents won't be proud of me. Like, no, that was never like my goal. Like that was never.
I was gonna ask, like, Did you like flip a switch at some point then? Like, was it?
I think what it was is that I mean, I'm not gonna like badmouth my family or anything like that.
Sure.
But I did grow up with a lot of mediocrity around me. You know,
Okay.
A lot of people just being like, "Yeah, I'm just going to work 9 to 5, come home, sit, and lie down and do nothing for the rest of the night." You know,
Right.
And then,
Which is like to say like that's like most people.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say,
But
right?
but
and
like,
I don't think that that's necessarily like that doesn't make them a bad person. I
Yeah.
just think that they just don't. They're satisfied.
yeah, exactly. In you know, I appreciate my parents for all they did in terms of like being able to like put food on the table and like, you know, putting a roof over my head and all that stuff, because they did all that. You know, they worked their 9 to 5 jobs and all that stuff, and you know, it was great. Like growing up was not a problem. You know, I wasn't starving. Like
Quote of I'll have that as the quote of the episode. Bryan Canonigo. Growing up was not a problem.
Yeah, it was, you know,
Chapter 11.
I still you know, I'm very nostalgic in that way, that I long for those longer summer days that I had back in like 98 and 99, you know.
Right.
When, you know, growing up was pretty easy. But I guess maybe it started in high school, when I guess I had to figure out like what I wanted to do, you know?
Yeah.
And when I got into music, yeah, that was it for me, man. Like I don't know, the bug hit me, and next thing you know, I'm like just playing like all day, practicing all summer, and nobody told me to do it. You know, I wasn't being forced to do it. I just loved it. Like I think that's the biggest difference with me growing up than with a lot of other kids that got kind of forced or thrown into music. I was not thrown into music. Like my parents were not like, you're going to take piano lessons, or you're going to take clarinet lessons, and you're going to be good. Like I never got any of that. You know, I guess, I don't know if they meant to do this, but they kind of just let me, you know, pursue my interests. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different way of parenting than a lot of other kids that I knew that grew up, or like a lot of my other peers too now, you know, were like, oh yeah, I've been taking lessons since I was 6 and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I didn't do that. Yeah. I literally got a broken clarinet in like 8th grade, and then I just figured out how to make like sounds on it. And then in high school, it was kind of the same thing, you know, like I got thrown into just musical situations. Like, hey, we need an alto player in big band. Can you do this? So it's like, okay, let's figure this out. I think, you know, it's a lot of fun. So let's just do it.
Yeah, it's just like playing the upper register of the clarinet. It's fine. It's like way easier.
But you know what I'm saying though. Like I'm sure you have friends too that like grew up in a situation where like, oh yeah, my parents told me I had to take piano lessons, you know, and then they end up like quitting or like hating that part of their, you know, not hating, but like they look back at that part of their lives that with like, you know, not such good memories.
Yeah, sure.
And
because you associate it with something that you disliked. You had a bad time doing this activity, so it's like you associate that activity, you know.
Yeah,
with that feeling,
and
so.
Man, I was not like that at all in like probably 7th or 8th grade and onwards up until today. You know, with music, I've always just been like super into it, and yeah, it's kind of crazy how it's never really left me. Even after all these years, you know, you would think it's after like, all these years that there'd be a time where you just like, man, this is just, I don't want to do it anymore. And
well, that's kind of where I am, Brian. I'm not gonna lie. Mm-hmm. That's like where I am with my own playing, you know. And I'm not making it about me, but it's that's just something that I, you know, it is hard to teach and be excited about like going to play a wedding. I play a wedding in 2 weeks or something. And all I can think of, the only thing I'm thinking of right now is, I'm the only horn player. 5-piece band. The 5-piece band blues, where it's like you just kind of have to make up your own part. Like playing with a 3-horn section, it's just so much easier. But that's all I can think about. I'm not thinking about, I get to play saxophone. Like it just never enters my mind anymore. And I think that I'm being selfish a little bit, because not everybody has the privilege of going and making decent money playing over a weekend at a wedding. But I'm just like, I'm not excited about it anymore. And I barely play anymore, Brian.
So here's the thing, right? So when I did my master's, it was a performance degree, right? As compared to what you did was more of a composition arranging degree, right?
Yeah. And
I think this is the big misconception about people who have performance degrees, is that, they're basically it's a useless degree is what they say, right? Or that's what a lot of people say, that it's like, oh, you have a performance degree, like you don't need that to play music. It's like, I agree, you don't need that to play music, right? But to me, if you have a performance degree, it says to me that you spent some time, whether it's a 3-year program, 4-year program, where you've developed some sort of discipline to learning an instrument at such a high level, right? And being able to basically push yourself to those limits. I think that says a lot about somebody professionally.
Absolutely, man. That's a really excellent way of describing that.
Well, and because I have students now that ask me all the time, it's like, hey, what can I do with my performance degree? Like what am I doing this for? Like I don't see myself as a saxophone player after this. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff. But my message to students all the time is that, like, no, you're not just getting a performance degree. It's not just about playing saxophone. It's about developing these skills that can translate to other professions, whether it be, in engineering, or whether you're going to be a doctor, or if you're going to go to medical school, if you're going to go to law school. It's
anything that requires discipline.
Yeah. And that's I think that's the big misconception, right? And I'm here to tell you that, like, being a musician in undergrad is probably one of the harder subjects to major in than the other arts, because of the constant pressure that you're put on to be able to perform at such a high level. And I think that's where a lot of people don't understand what, going through music school is. Like, they think, a lot of people just think, oh, music school, yeah, it's easy or whatever. No, man, these kids are stressed out. They are working very hard, to be able to do what they do at a high level. And
Well, and I feel like and that is true for a lot of things, but I think especially what makes music school so, like you're saying, like so full of pressure is like the immediacy of the pressure.
Yes.
It's like, okay, play this tune and play it perfectly, and here's all the people that are listening. That's a little different than, giving your bouncing your paper back and forth between like edits and drafts and all that stuff. That's just the first example I thought of, but it's just like this sort of immediate, like, you're in the spotlight and go kind of thing.
I like to compare it to, like, for example, I'm a big sports guy, right? So
sure,
like, for example, in baseball, somebody can bat an average of 300 for their entire career. So that's 30% of the time you're hitting the ball. And that's your main job, is to hit the ball. And you're only doing that 30% of the time. And you get considered as, like, one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
You can't do that in music.
Hi there, hate to interrupt, but this is the halfway point of the episode, and I'm going to split this into 2 parts. So this is the end of part 1. I'm going to go to part 2. The internet told me that my file was too big, No sweat. No transitions. Just go to part 2 right now. Go do it. Go. Find out about the butter. It's important.